People actually think now that reading equates with scrolling on your phone.
Educators are so pressured now to teach for test scores to get into these Ivy League schools that they're really not taking account of the critical thinking skills that slow and deep reading foster.
I'm not going back to this mother's group. They're just talking about what kind of diaper to buy, what kind of pacifier. And isn't there a place after college where women get together and talk about the real questions in life? We tend to think that taking time to do something that feeds our soul somehow works against us being mothers. It's just the opposite. Motherhood has everything to do with taking care of your heart.
Welcome to my guests today. Marcie Stokman and her daughter committed 5 years ago to reading good books together. There are now close to 10,000 women who participate in more than 1,000 well-read mom groups across the U.S. and beyond. And I'm so excited to introduce this group, this organization, to all of our listeners today. Many of the books that they read are literary masterworks, classics, the Western canon. A friend of mine is currently reading the Iliad, but others are more contemporary authors. So we think of Walter Wendell-Berry, I imagine some Walter Percy in there, Annie Dillard, and each work is very carefully chosen to help women better understand their humanity and the deepest questions of their hearts. So please join me in welcoming Marcie Stokman and Colleen Hutt. It's so nice to have you ladies here today.
Thank you.
I wanted to just start off with sort of just taking a look at maybe a little cultural autopsy of what's going on in our country right now in this matter of reading books. There was a recent article in The Atlantic in which the author described how students at Columbia University, so this is Ivy League school students, are telling their professors that they don't know how to read whole books. And so as a result, over the last 10 to 15 years, professors have stopped assigning whole books. So instead of reading Moby Dick, for example, they're assigning chapters from Moby Dick. Or instead of reading all of a Charles Dickens, they're reading excerpts from Charles Dickens. Or maybe at a real crunch, they could read the whole Christmas Carol. So I wanted to get your take on this. Other statistics that I've seen, only 5% of Americans have read more than 12 books in the last 3 months. 30% of Americans had not read any books at all in the last few months. So as women who are in the business of reading whole books, what do you think are some of the causes of this phenomena that we're seeing in our culture today?
Well, I can take that. In 2007, the smartphone came on the scene, and this has impacted reading. It's even changed the very definition of what it means to read. So as a culture, we used to understand reading literature was educative for the human condition. And that was just understood broadly. But since the smartphone, since technology, since scrolling on our phones, people actually think now that reading equates with scrolling on your phone. Like I was talking to a woman at a restaurant, and I was writing an article there, and she said, "What is it you do?" Because I had a stack of books piled by me, and I said, I run a national book club for women. And she said, "I can't even remember the last time I held a book. I think it's probably been about 8 years." And then she pulled out her phone and she said, "But I don't need to. I have all of the reading I can possibly keep up with right here, keeping up with my social media." So I understood that she understood reading to be scanning and scrolling on her phone. And technology, reading on our phone this way, fragments our attention. So we're parceling out our attention, constantly dividing our attention. And so students who have grown up with this kind of technology have fragmented attention spans. I think we've all suffered. I suffer. That's why I'm such a big proponent of sitting down with a physical book and letting yourself receive that book, get into the story. You don't have anywhere that you're going to click or scan or scroll. You are just receiving what the author's giving you. And this, in turn, instead of fragmenting our attention, focuses our attention.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
There's been so much research on this recently and so much written about it. That Atlantic article that you mentioned, The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books by Rose Horowitz, or another one that they also published, Why Kids Aren't Falling in Love with Reading by Catherine Marsh. And there was another article that came out in May of this past year, 2024, protesting the decline of reading. College students are reading less than ever. Same with adolescents, same with all of us. What's going on? And they had asked Joe Miller, the author of this article, he had asked 22 professors to recommend books for incoming freshmen, and they compiled a list for the Chronicle of Higher Education, asking why this decline, what's behind it. And according to one of the professors who wrote for this chronicle, she said, there's been a lot of loss during COVID of learning and stress and anxiety. So the thought, I think, is if you assign a whole book to read, that's going to be very stress-inducing for students, lower academic expectations, and teaching educators are so pressured now to teach for tests and for achievement and for scores and for test scores to get into these Ivy League schools that they're really not taking account of the critical thinking skills that slow and deep reading foster. So I think those are all, besides just the technological distractions of our phones and devices and social media, I think there's like this perfect storm brewing right now that we really need to kind of steer the ship in a different way.
Right. And why is that? So what would you say? You mentioned the fragmented attention. What with the loss of deep reading and long form reading and being with books and off screens, what are the broader effects of that on a family, on society, on civilization?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, long form reading, it teaches us, for example, literature, we learn about our humanity. We learn about what the virtues look like, what the vices look like. We learn what self-deception looks like, So, for example, when I read Crime and Punishment, a book which I didn't even enjoy that much, you're in the mind of a criminal for about 650 pages. But when I finished it, that great books stay with you. They linger. And that book stayed with me. And I came to see that just like this character in the novel, Raskolnikov was deceiving himself, thinking he could step over a punishment that he had committed and wasn't getting caught, that he was above the law. I was trying to step over something in my life. I could see that. I had an aha moment where I thought, wow, I'm doing the same thing Raskolnikov did. And I was able to make a change in my life and reconcile in a situation with a friend. Wow. And face it in a different way because I saw through my imagination what he was doing, and then I saw in another way that I was doing the same thing. So a society that doesn't have this kind of introspection into their own awareness of their own the way we work, the inner workings, is going to be probably less relational, more lonely, lacking empathy, more feisty and fighting, I think, without an ability to have a civil dialogue back and forth. It cultivates all those things. Reading and discussing literature cultivates dialogue, conversation, reading face message or facial cues. So it's a loss of all those things if we don't read and discuss literature.
Yeah, and I would just add to all of those things a real lack of meaning. I think a lot of the epidemic that we find ourselves in right now of depression and anxiety at record highs in our country point to a fact that many people don't know really what their lives are for. And I think that reading awakens our humanity in a really deep level that allows us a space to ask those questions. And when we try and circumvent that and don't allow ourselves the time and the leisure and the thought to kind of ask the big questions of our lives, we're left with a kind of sense of meaninglessness that I think has been pervasive in the last few years. So, I think reading is really kind of at a fundamental way. It helps us to awaken our humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about Well-Read Mom and how it all came about, origin story, and just what you're doing around the country.
So my daughter, when Beth was a new mom, so about 13 years ago, she called me one day and I heard this cry in her voice. She was lonely, actually. And she said, Mom, I'm not going back to this mother's group. I've been there 3 times. And they're just talking about, their kids and what kind of diaper to buy, what kind of pacifier. And is this it? Is this what I'm going to do now? Isn't there a place after college where women get together and talk about the real questions in life? And at that time in my own journey, I had been giving some talks to mothers of preschoolers in northern Minnesota where I live, talking about the value of children's books, helping educate what they could read to their children, which is an education in itself that I think we need help with, that we pick rich, wonderful works for our children. But anyway, they said, can you come back and speak again? So I said, well, they said, speak on anything. So I thought, I'm just going to call this little series of talks Well-Read Mom. The idea just came to me. Let's see what women are reading. So I gave this talk on the importance of reading, and truthfully, my own reading practice had fallen by the wayside, reading literature for its own sake. Yes, I was reading books with my clinical nurse specialist, journals and parenting books and some spiritual books, but I had, what fell by the wayside was reading great quality literature. That seemed to be something I didn't have a time for. It was like a luxury I couldn't afford. So that fell by the wayside. So when I'm speaking to these women what I found was not one woman was reading quality literature for its own sake. No one, not one woman was. And so I drove home sad. I felt like, wow, here I am coming to tell you one more thing you're failing at, And I did not want to do that because women juggle so many things in the air and have so much responsibility. I wanted to encourage them, and yet the talk I was giving really wasn't helping anyone take a step to read more and read well. So when Beth called that day, boy, her desire, her cry merged with my desire to begin reading great and worthy books again. And our desires merged, and really Well-Read Mom was born from that. And we said, let's just try this for 5 years. Let's put together a book list. Let's try it for 5 years. Well, now we're in our 13th year, and it's crazy because it's word of mouth. It's so grassroots. We didn't intend to start this big organization, which it's kind of becoming. It's still so grassroots. But women want this. Like, her cry in her heart is the cry of many, many women. So we're finding this resurgence of getting together in person in little groups across the United States and sharing the same books and growing in friendship and growing closer to the Lord.
So Colleen, how did you come to Well-Read Mom?
Oh, yeah, it's a wonderful story, actually. I was working as the director of pastoral formation for adults at a parish in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I kind of had a similar desire to form Catholic culture at our parish. And the way that I thought would be best to do that would be by reading things in common and discussing them. So I had started a lot of different initiatives, Soup with Substance, where we'd read an article and meet in people's homes for hospitality. I started like a little Great Books forum where I would pair up older people in the parish with middle schoolers, and we read Dante together. It was fabulous. And so one day I was Googling speakers on Flannery O'Connor, and Marcie's name popped up. And I called her and I invited her to speak. And she said, I'm starting this thing called Well-Read Mom. I'm really busy right now. I can't, but you should be a part of it. And about a year later, my little part-time job at the parish was growing, big demands. So I decided to return home full-time again. I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to start a Well-Read Mom chapter. So I did. And they had hosted, I think, their second little conference up in St. Paul. And I went up there with my sister, and I had the date wrong. And we had gotten there a day early, and we were shopping around, and someone called and said, aren't you coming to the conference? I said, yeah, we're so looking forward to it. We'll be there tomorrow. And they said, no, the last speaker's about to go on. You've missed the whole thing. And we flew over to St. Thomas, heard the last speaker, and I immediately went to the bathroom and I started crying because my sister and I had left 11 kids at home between the two of us. Our husbands were holding down the fort. I just felt so badly that I had messed up the day. And someone told Marcie that there's this woman crying in the bathroom, and she came in and checked on me.
Oh, man.
And she said, well, that's okay, Colleen. My daughters and I will just bring the conference to you in Milwaukee, and we'll give it all over for your little new group. And that's literally how it started. I was a great books major from the University of Notre Dame. I had always loved reading. I, too, had fallen away from it while raising 5 kids. And, it was just this friendship that was meant to be. We spent 4 hours sitting in my living room that day talking about it. I felt like I had discovered a long-lost friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel I was excited to read about the mission and everything because I did feel so seen. I know that I've been having children now for 19 years. I have 7 kids, and reading a whole book, I think the times that I've made the time for it have been really awesome and amazingly healing. But it is the first thing to go when you're a mom in the thick of it. And you have all this stuff, and you're so busy feeding all these other people in your life, you start to feel scraped thin and burned out and like too little butter over too much bread, to borrow a phrase from Bilbo. But to actually take the time to feed yourself, then in turn you can feed your family and feed others. And that's why I think the Well-Read Mom mission spoke to me so much and is speaking to so many women around the country. Yeah.
Well, we tend to think that taking care of our hearts, taking time to do something that feeds our soul somehow works against us being mothers. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it's just the opposite, because motherhood has everything to do with taking care of your heart, because you're going to be in relationship with each child based on this kind of this margin, this depth you have in your own life. To see them, to receive them, to be with them in the tensions of life. So it has really, really impacted my mothering in a positive way. No, it's not just about being efficient as a mom. In fact, that's the last thing it's about. It's about being with the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think our culture today, whenever you think of me time, if you go on social media, what you see, me time has to be, I'm going to go out and do some like shopping therapy, or the mommy wine culture. I mean, that's just a whole nother topic. But the idea of reading hard books, being your me time, is so countercultural, but so radically necessary, that I love that you're giving an alternative in that way for me time. Let's pivot a little bit to what you read, because this is also really interesting, because people are like, okay, well, I'm just going to read. And one of the things growing up, you would go in the library and there'd be a poster and be just like, read 15 minutes a day. And I remember even as a small child, I would look at those posters and think, well, like, what do you read? And one of Well-Read Mom, your hallmarks is you read hard things. So tell me a little bit about maybe those first early book lists, how you make the book lists, how does a specific group choose a book, and more.
I'm going to let Colleen answer most of this, but I'll just say that we are intent and on raising the bar culturally, like books that have stood the test of time, as well as some great books that are new, supporting new writers. But books that have stood the test of time have done so for a reason. And so to just let them fall off book lists and not do the work that it takes to experience the benefits is such a shame, such a loss. Like Colleen mentioned, meaning. We want to live meaningful, beautiful lives, and there's a bit of work to it. But in that work, you're with friends, so you can, this accountability with other women, boy, that is a key that what I might not do for myself on my own, I can do and I will do with friends. It works for me. And apparently it works for a lot of women. But Colleen, you speak to how we choose the books at Why Hard Books.
Yeah, Marcie and I actually, we just wrote a book together called The Well-Read Life, Nourish Your Soul Through Deep Reading and Intentional Friendship with Ave Maria Press. And we have 2 chapters kind of dedicated to this question about choosing books that change us and why we read the hard books. And I'll kind of just give a brief overview of that. I think at the center is we read hard books to awaken our imaginations and to enter more deeply into reality and to awaken our sense of humanity. So I want to just kind of touch on those couple of things, particularly, when we talk about awakening our imagination, what that really is books give us an image to follow at different critical moments of our life. Reading the Aeneid is not going to save anyone, but it might show you why you need to be saved, right? Or reading Dante, or it might show you when he's leaving Troy burning and he has his father on his back and his son by the hand. That image might spur you on when you are called out of comfort to greatness, when you have to do something hard, when you have to commit to something. If I have that image of Aeneas with his father and his son and building a legacy of something, man, that's an image that actually transforms my life. When I have to pick up and read a book and I think, what cultural legacy or heritage am I giving my own children? It starts with that image, like this is something for the future. So literature gives you these beautiful images that you can file in your mind and pull out from your heart and from your mind when you need them the most. What does sacrificial love look like? Well, there's a great image of that in the story of Pinocchio. We just actually brought a wonderful new version of Pinocchio back into print with these amazing commentaries by Franco Nembrini. And this is a book that doesn't end in a Hollywood version. The Geppetto and the son get together after he's done all of his bad things in life and they hug and cue the Disney music. Yeah. It doesn't end there. It ends with Pinocchio carrying his father on his back or in the sea, much like Aeneas, and then working really hard to care for him. And actually through work, kind of redeeming himself for the first time. Beautiful. And so these images, and I could go through so many because I love it so much. But these things awaken our imagination and our sense of humanity. Why do we read hard things? Because life is hard. Because there's discord and there's death and there's sickness and there's real human questions. And to kind of put on blinders that these things don't exist is false. It's not, I don't think, a very deeply religious way of being in the world. I think a more authentic way of being in the world is actually seeing the world for what it is, which is at times it's a valley of tears. And at times it's charged with the shook grandeur of God, right? I mean, it's charged with shook foil, as poet Gerard Manley Hopkins says, that there's this grace and there's this sorrow, and this paradoxical tension exists in our human experience. And we have to make a response of our lives. We have to respond to these two competing realities, grace and discord at the same time. And books can really help us do that. So I think that's kind of at the heart of it, is reading not to escape reality. I always kind of cringe when I hear people say, I need a beach read to take my mind from my life. That is not at all the sense in which Well-Read Mom reads literature. We read to dive deeply into our lives, to understand them more fully, to open up questions we haven't thought about, to love people more, to walk in their shoes. And, as John Paul II talked about in his letter to artists, great art is a bridge to the religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
So every day you can pick up a book. It's like being in front of a great work of art that can change you.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So in terms of, what are some more other books that have been, do all the Well-Read Mom groups read the same book nationally? How do they choose?
When I was starting this, I said to Beth, let's do this for five years. Let's just start there and let's really do it best. Let's stick with it. And I'll set up the book list. So I pulled all these wonderful books that I had read earlier in my life when I was single, and pulled them and put them on, stacked them in piles on my rug in my living room, trying to figure out how to organize this book list. And these were books I really wanted my daughter to read. I wanted to reread them. I wanted them to be part of her formation and reinforce my own formation. And so I piled these books and I thought, how are we going to do this? Do we start with the great ancient epics and read Homer and then Virgil and then Dante, or, Augustine and Dante? Do we read all these books chronologically? But then I thought, I'm not sure I want to be in this book club, actually. This sounds like too much, too hard.
Right.
It's like we need to learn to walk around the block before we do a marathon. So yes, we read all of those books. Those are all works that we tackle, but we have to do it in a way that actually works in a woman's life. So easier reads during the holiday months. We do a spiritual classic during Advent and Lent. We read a harder, great book, in the winter months when people have more time to curl up with a novel. So we want to make it work for a woman's life. And so I picked up Pope John Paul's letter to women, and I was reading it, and he was thanking women in their various capacities. Thank you, women who work. Thank you, mothers. Thank you, women who, he went on and on thanking women in their various capacities. And I just understood we could organize the book list based on the capacities of a woman's life. So we began with Year of the Daughter, and then Year of the Mother, Year of the Spouse, Year of the Worker. We've done Year of the Contemplative, Year of the Artist, Year of the Family. And this year we're diverging a little bit, Year of the Father. So we're reading books about father, because every woman is a daughter. And so we organize the books that way. Thank you to St. John Paul II, who really, I have come more deeply to understand his call. I really believe he commissioned women for leisure time and quality of life. And that is exactly what's happening with Well-Read Mom. We are taking back our homes and creating an environment where we can read these kind of books, and our children watch us read, and they end up reading, and our husbands read more, and there's this ripple effect. So that's how we got the structure. And yes, we read the books at the same time, and I'll let Colleen speak to that.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing that Well-Read Mom does. It's a proposal to stay together. And kind of in a Catholic sense with a small c, like a universality of our reading together, that it's beautiful when 10,400 women are all reading the same work at the same time. The power and the ripple effect that kind of comes from that. Marcie and I have both had experiences. We're on a plane and we see someone reading, Peace Like a River in October and think, are you in Well Read Mom? Yes. Are you in Well Read Mom? I
awesome.
am. And
It's so Catholic.
you just automatically have this connection and this conversation that is so beautiful. And it's a proposal really to stay together. And I think that's really at the heart of kind of combating some of this loneliness and isolation that we feel is we're like a family. We're a sisterhood of people from all over the country and beyond, actually now, in a few other countries, where we're building on a great conversation. And there's a strength and a depth to the friendship when we can all reference the same kinds of things. We just had our national conference in Milwaukee, and we had 350 women come in from 20 different states. And, someone made a joke about East of Eden and everybody laughed. And it was beautiful. It was just beautiful because everyone understood the reference. So I think that's something really special is a proposal to follow. And that there's also a humility in that. And there's something in that following that speaks to kind of against our tendency of individualism. Marcie, you spoke on this at the conference. There was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal, right, about I don't want to join your book club. Do you remember that?
You want me to share on that?
Yeah, share on that, because I thought that was really a great point.
Right. The article was, no, I don't want to join your book club. And what I thought to myself when I saw the title, I said, says the loneliest generation ever. Because we want to, there's this belief out there that the individual creates themselves by themselves for themselves. And it's not a true belief, because none of us makes ourselves, we're not given life by ourselves. We're given life by our Creator. And so because of that, we're relational. We're created. We're in relationship. And so individualism, we can make individual choices, but we are made for relationship. So part of this loneliness is believing something that's not true. We actually need each other. And in this article, in New York, they decided instead of reading the same book, they would all just read what they wanted and then meet together and read. But they left, and no one, you don't. Yeah. When I go to my group, I grow from the women. Like, I need them to see another facet of. So it's okay to say we need each other. It's a true thing to say we need each other.
Right. And I think you spoke of the accountability too, just at the psychological level. You're more likely to stick with a hard thing if you're sticking with it in community. We see that at the level of the family, the level of parish communities, at the level. So we have to have that unifying factor. So, right, like, I don't think I would want to join a book club where everyone just read whatever they wanted either, because it's all this effort for just sitting around together and talking about diaper sizes again or something. We're back to the beginning.
And we take great care with the book list, which is really sort of a heavy thing, actually. I mean, we pray about it. We challenge each other on it. We have criteria that the book has to meet. And so what's being proposed is a thoughtfully curated book list. And we stay together and, let's see, Colleen, I forgot what else. I was going to say something else, but
yeah, could I just jump in there and add something? Because the Well-Read Mom method, we kind of have crystallized a method for Well-Read Mom. And the steps of the method are read, compare, share, and accompany. And reading, first of all, reading something together in common just like we already discussed, enforces a sense of community, cultural conversation. It's also having really big ripple effects right now in the publishing world. And that's
right.
something that the Well-Read Mom team is very dialed into. When you read 10,000, when you need 10,000 copies of Peace Like a River, that's very difficult to do. We kind of mess up Amazon's algorithms, and we have to work with publishers now. And I mean, it's just like unbelievable. And some are good to work with and some aren't so good. Some believe that you're going to sell these books, some don't. And to try and, make sure there's enough copies for everyone. But this reading, this togetherness, we also really encourage the women to banish guilt, banish the sense that you're not doing something by reading. You're actually doing the most important work. You're doing the higher level work, not the work that's just for productivity's sake, but you're doing the deep work of the soul. So that's really important. And then the comparing step is, what does this book mean for my life? You have to take the words on the page and you have to turn them inside. At this conference last weekend, I had a woman, she was probably 70 years old. She came up to me and she said, I've been an avid reader my whole life, but I don't think I've ever read a book asking the question, what does it mean for me? And I just thought, wow, isn't that we were not just reading for plot or what happens or to kind of check a box like, oh, now I understand what life is like in Afghanistan by reading this book or something. We read, what does it mean for me in my heart? What does it mean for me in my life? So that comparing part is really important. And then you bring that work that you do and you share it at the meetings. And when all the women are doing that work, it's amazing the insights that come out, how rich and deep the conversation is, guided by also the Well-Read Mom audios that we provide for the leaders. We make it really easy to join a group. We provide really good discussion questions and entry points in our yearly companion that we publish. So we really try and help create the scaffolding around the questions and the discussions that are going to get to the best parts of what we want to talk about. And then I think the most important part is, because you've done all of this other work, you accompany each other. You really become friends. And that, to me, is what's actually changing the culture right now.
100%. Right, friendship.
Can I say that I shared at the conference very briefly about leaving the church and coming back to it. And when I was thinking about part of why I left the church is it's so basic and so simple, and it seems, and I just wanted friends. I just wanted friends. And of course, grateful to God in His mercy, we're back in the church, have been now for years. And I'm so grateful for being part of the church. But there's such a hunger for real friendship, and we don't know how to do that so well. But I want to say that, we are raising the bar. We are reading hard books, and this can be really intimidating. And women don't want to seem like they aren't smart or, so there's this intimidation, which is kind of a hard thing because we want to raise the bar and at the same time encourage every single woman to join in. And so we have a couple ways that help with that. Like, wherever you are in your reading ability, that's where you are. And nobody fails here. You just join in and you start coming. One woman, it took her 2 years to finish a book.
Wow.
But she stayed with it every month. She'd read a couple chapters of the book. And after 2 years, she finished a book. And she told me after 5 years, she said, you know what? I am a reader. And I said to her, are you going to finish this book? It was a big one. She says, of course I'm going to finish. I know now how to do this. I know how to allocate my time. I know, she said, I'm a reader now. Now I will. But it took that long process of getting to that level. And we have one rule in Well-Read Mom, and it's, if you don't get the reading done, don't apologize. but still come to your group, soak in this atmosphere, and see if you don't read more than you have before. See if you don't have this greater desire to read. And one woman at my group, she came and she hadn't read the book, and I overheard her discussion as she was leaving. She was talking to someone else, and she said, you know what? I didn't finish this book, and I'll tell you what, that is not going to happen again. I missed out. So it's rather than shame, no shame here, no guilt here. You start where you are. Everyone can succeed. But the idea is, I don't want to miss out. This is for me. This is from my heart. Even husbands and kids are saying, Mom, go read your Well-Read Mom book. They see it's for them, because what helps Mom helps everybody.
Everybody's happy when Mom's happy. That's really wonderful, and such a message of hope, because I think, a lot of us, we go through the school system, and reading is something that if you don't do the whole thing or you don't get the book, then it's a failure. And of course, losing sight of the fact that all of those assessments and papers we write on books were intended originally probably to get us to read the book for our own sake, right? And for that, but that's been almost completely lost. And so people they come out of school saying, I'm not good at this. I'm not a good reader. I just can't do it. And it's so hopeful to hear about women who are retraining the brain, that we can heal from that and rediscover this deep beauty in the great literature.
And it's absolutely critical to your point, because when we start enjoying these books, our kids notice that. Wow, Mom, there's something in there that she's finding. Sometimes you're sitting there, you're laughing out loud at something. Before you know it, these kids are pulling. My daughter wasn't a reader. She's pulling these Well-Read Mom books off and the shelf, and she's becoming a reader. But it's not from me hounding her. It's from this lifestyle, this environment in the home where reading is really something you look forward to. It's relaxing.
And it changes the way you parent, too. It changes your relationships with other women, with your husband, with your spouse. I mean, it's something really noticeable and transformative. And that's exactly why Marcie and I wrote The Well-Read Life. It's exactly to kind of speak to this point. Why should we invest in reading now? How can we get started? And looking at the problems, the way we read is changing, the way we're relating to others is changing, and we need to do something about it. And giving people the practical tools to say, okay, we can put down our phones and make different choices. We can feed our imaginations. We can be present in this moment and actually cultivate a space of deeper awareness. These are all things we can do, and we'll show you how. And that's exactly the message that we want for men and women to really start again.
That's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know that we are cutting into your vacation time, Marcie. We really appreciate it. And where can they go to purchase the book?
The book is available at Ave Maria Press, The Well-Read Life. And if anyone also wanted to get started with a great Advent read, something that I would highly recommend now is our version of Pinocchio, with these special reflections on a father's love by it's the original story of Pinocchio, alongside special commentary on each chapter by Franco Nimbriti, and that's available for sale from Word Among Us Press. And that's just a great story to even just get started at the Christmas season with your family, because it's such a beautiful story about love and returning to the Father.
I love it. And I love returning to the original. Get rid of the Disney Pinocchio. Let's just go back to the original tale. It's
exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, ladies. Yes.
If any woman there says, hey, I'd like to be part of this, but how would I start? How would I find a group? Go to our website, Well-Read Mom, and we will help you. We will help you every step of the way. We have women who this is their work. They help you get started. They help you either start a group or find one. And we really want every woman to succeed, and we are better together. And this will impact the culture.
Yeah, we have a thing on our website. You can type in your zip code and find groups near you that have already started. And if you can't, our team is very much at the ready to help you get started on your own.
And it's not too late this year. Just start wherever will help you merge right onto the freeway.
I love that image. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you for having us. It's really been a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.